Thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to hand you over to Jason Mobley, who's going to speak a little bit about his use cases and some tips and tricks. Jason, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jason Mobley. I am with Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, in the United States. We have been using Zoom for quite some time now. We started about 3 years ago, and I have been actively using synchronous video teaching for about 10 years now. That said, let me tell you a little bit about the FAMU Zoom history. A couple years ago, we did a proof of concept, meaning that we wanted to test Zoom out before we deployed it to our teachers and our professors. And we did that. Very happy with the feature set of Zoom. I've seen a lot of questions in the Q&A about features and whiteboarding. And I guess the question that I would ask myself is, what sets Zoom apart over all the other platforms? And I have used Cisco WebEx. I have used Teams, I have used Google Hangouts, Google Meet. I've used them all, but I think what sets Zoom apart is, number one, the features, the ease of use, especially for students. I'm even doing telemedicine with Zoom, and we have 70, 80-year-old patients coming in using Zoom without any issues whatsoever. Also, we deployed Zoom with COVID-19. We signed a site license back in January, and when we did that, we didn't know that at the end of February, beginning of March, we would be thrust into this new environment. So we had a lot of faculty members kind of concerned. They've never taught in that environment. From the questions that I've seen on the Q&A, it seems like a lot of you are interested in a couple things. Number one, the features of Zoom. Number two, the security of Zoom. And I think Leo has done an excellent job in covering the security, but I wanted to kind of cover that one more time in a statement. When you get a house built, right, they put windows, they put doors, they might even put an alarm system in that house. When they do that, it is up to you to lock your doors at night and turn your alarm on when you leave. So the one thing that Zoom has always had is it has always had these features of meeting passwords and enabling the waiting room. But now what we're having to do because of COVID-19, and Zoom has elevated because they've now servicing 3 million people on Zoom. But what they had to do is they've had to push these settings to automatically put all these locks in. At the university, we have had no issues with Zoom bombing. We have had no issues with anyone getting in. If you still read about that in the news, the only thing that could be happening is that someone is not turning those controls on. So I commend Leo for really hitting on those because those are very important. And yes, you need to turn them on. But once you follow the plan that Leo has laid out, you will not have an issue with Zoom bombing. You will not have an issue with anyone showing any lewd material or anything like that. So those controls are in place for a reason. What I'd like to talk to you about today is kind of Zoom for education and use cases and some best practices. So what I find interesting about Zoom is the various ways that you can use them. Initially, we talk about meetings or classes, but there are hundreds of other ways that you can use Zoom. So let's talk about on the teaching and learning side. First of all, you can use it for live lectures or lessons. I've seen a lot of people in the Q&A ask about recorded lectures. So yes, you can pre-record lectures and then post them to Google Classroom or whatever platform you're using. You can do it for small group work, so we can use breakout rooms and assign that. You can preload the breakout rooms and assign specific students to specific rooms, or you can do them on the fly when you're in the meeting. So I like the features of that. You can use it for quizzes and surveys. Again, Leo has shown the polling feature. You can preload those polls and you can use them as a quiz and not show the results immediately or show them at the end of the quiz. And then you can download the results to use it as a grading situation. At the university, we've even used it as virtual proctoring. We're in the midst of final exams starting Monday, and we want to make sure that we don't have all this active cheating going on. I get that you guys are primary and secondary education, but if you have the need for virtual proctoring, you can have students take their exams while someone is physically watching them. So that's a unique use case. Of course, presentations and speeches. On the virtual engagement side, you can use it for office hours. If a student needs to meet with you or a parent needs to meet with you and talk with you about an issue with a student, you can use that. You also can use it for tutoring. You can use it for study groups, guest speakers, parent-teacher conferences, and again, I think I put virtual proctoring in there twice. On the professional development side, teaching observations, staff training, teaching work groups and online conferences. And from a school district perspective, again, I think Aber mentioned on the staff meetings, he wanted to use that all the time because he can mute people. I think that's a good feature. You can also use it to interview staff and incoming people into your school. You can use it for announcements, even emergency preparation demonstrations, and virtual commencement and graduation. So here in the States, again, we can't have commencement. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it virtually. And we actually found a nice way to do that. You can include music and whatnot, and we're going to record that and share that with the students after they graduate. On the tips and best practices for distance teaching, and there's hundreds more, but here's the top 10 that I want to cover with you today. I would mute all participants upon entry to minimize student chatter. That's a setting when you book the meeting. So if a student somehow got kicked out of a meeting due to bad internet connection and they came back in and they forgot to mute and they're yelling at their dog or something, if you mute them automatically on entry, then that you don't have to worry about dealing with muting them as they come in. I would close all programs that create sound, like your email and other programs with notifications, because you want to minimize anything that would cause distractions to the students. One thing that I recommend to our faculty is to book your classes as a reoccurrence with no fixed time. What that means is, let's say my class meets every Monday. Instead of making it every Monday, if I say it's a reoccurrence with no fixed time, it's going to keep that ID for that class all the way until the point we come back to school. Because what I find is you don't want to have a new ID every time you have a class or every week, because it confuses the students, it confuses the parents. So again, point 3 is way less confusing to do that. I would test your teaching location prior to teaching. What I mean by that is ask a colleague to join your video and make sure that they hear your sound, your audio. Even record yourself and go back and watch the recording. I think it's very important from a teaching perspective is for you to see what the students see and what that kind of experience is. Number 6, require your students to be on camera and engage. Now, I did answer a question in the Q&A about can you turn the students' cameras off? Yes, you can, right? When you book your meeting, you can say participants, no video. Again, I think you would take that on a case-by-case basis because I think each teacher has the ability to set up their class as they choose. But the reason that I recommend that they be on camera and engaged is if you're not on camera, how do you know that they're focusing to your lesson? And the one big thing about teaching over video is that we want to incorporate knowledge transfer, right? We want to make sure that the students are getting this. So the one thing when I teach over video, I always have all my students on a gallery view, which means that I see all of them on the screen at once, and I'm looking at their eyeballs, right? Because again, if I see someone looking confused, I'm going to call on them and ask them questions. Also, I like to use nonverbals, right? So I always tell my students, is everyone good? Give me a thumbs up. If you feel like I need to slow down, do like this. If I'm driving you crazy and you feel like you're going to hang yourself right now, just stay with me and I'll be with you through. So those nonverbals keep people drawn in the entire time that you teach. Also, use a virtual background. As Leo has stated, it does make things look more personalized and professional. And if you ever seen the video on the BBC where the gentleman's doing an interview and his kids are running in behind him and his wife runs in and snatches the baby, if you had a virtual background, you probably wouldn't have seen all that. Also, if you need a green screen, they do sell them at thewebaround.com. I did see some questions on the chat about that they're sold out over in Ireland. I have seen them on eBay actually pretty cheap. What this does is it hooks to the back of your chair and then it cuts you out of the screen. Now, some of you might have experienced where you turn a virtual background on and it looks like the image is bleeding onto your face, right? What that is, and not to get super technical, but your processor of your laptop is not up to spec to allow you to use a virtual background without a green screen. But that doesn't mean that you can't still use a virtual background. You just need a green screen to do so. Number 9, preload your polls to access them quickly. So you can load the polls ahead of time, or you can ask a question for engagement at any point during the class. But I do recommend preloading them. And lastly, try to engage your students with nonverbals as much as possible. And again, I'll be answering questions in the Q&A, and after my presentation, I'll stick around and answer any questions that you may have. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Leo.
Jason, thank you very much. That was great, and to look at different use cases that we hadn't thought about. I certainly didn't think about exams and monitoring exams. No, I think we all learn something every